they are the end user. And so they build a great product for themselves. And when they're using it and they say, I don't like this, they fix it. When a software engineer is building for somebody who they don't understand, then they lack the ability to say, this isn't a good design, because they don't understand actually what the customer is trying to accomplish. And they lack the ability to know whether or not they've really nailed the requirements, because they're not the user.
Joining me is Ryan Debenham. Ryan's career has taken him from building enterprise tech at Qualtrics to scaling Grout as a CTO and now leading GRIN as a CEO. Do you guys have a process of how you get engineers into like talking with the customers?
I've seen it in a variety of ways.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Mastering Tech Growth. Every week we chat with industry leaders to bring you big ideas on how to grow. I'm Mike Sirius, and today we are diving into why it's not enough for software engineers to stay in their lane and what happens when they bring go-to-market thinking into how they build. Joining me is Ryan Debenham. Ryan's career has taken him from building enterprise tech at Qualtrics to scaling Grout as a CTO and now leading GRIN as a CEO. He's lived through the journey of crossing lanes, from technologist to president to CEO. And today he's sharing what that shift taught him about building products people actually adopt. Ryan, great to have you on.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
So we'd love to kick off with this one. When I say mastering tech growth, what comes to mind?
That's a great question. I think you could think about that in a variety of ways. As you mentioned, I started my career as an engineer, and so the first thing that I go to is technology growth as an engineer, the skill set that you have, the evolution of different ways that we can build products, different technologies that we can use. It's so hot on my mind right now because AI as a new foundational building block it feels like such a growth moment for technology people right now, thinking about how do we take this new fundamental building block and create new types of products. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Another thing that comes to mind is professional growth. How do you navigate a career? In fact, I actually felt lost early in my career, trying to think about, will I always be a software engineer? And if I'm not a software engineer, where do I go? And to be very transparent, my first internship was with a big enterprise mining company. And my intuition at that time was, well, I get my boss's job. And then if I'm successful, I get their boss's job. And then if I'm successful, I get their boss's job. And, at that company, the leader of the technology division was a CIO. And that looked like such a boring job. So I had kind of this crisis, like, where is my career going or growing? So I'd be happy to talk more about that, but growth professionally and then business growth is just such a fun topic. How do you really grow a business? How do you create something that customers love? And using technology as the primary driver.
I love that. You put like almost like the three pillars around how you think about growth. So I want to rephrase this question and make it, I want to say more difficult, but let's see. So from all the things that drive a tech venture growth, so we're talking about any business that is technology driven. If you can choose from all the things that influence growth directly or indirectly, could be sales, marketing, hiring great talent, go-to-market strategies, and all of the things. If you would choose one, what do you think is the most important from your point of view when it comes to growth?
That one's easy for me. It's a good product. At the end of the day, it's a good product that customers love. I think there's two primary drivers of growth in a business. I think customers can pull you forward because they love what you're building so much that they need and want more of it. Or I think that you can brute force push a company forward. I think that you can push what you've built onto people And that doesn't mean that it's not valuable, but it's not
Mhm.
being pulled for. It's being pushed. And
Ooh,
and so
I love
I do think the right product
mm.
that customers truly love and it truly solves their problems is the best driver of growth ultimately.
Excellent. Such an excellent answer, and I love that. So it's like a pull and push mechanics, right? You can be behind your product, just pushing through sales
Yep.
and marketing that forward, or you could just enjoy getting pulled by your customers forward. You
Yeah.
just want to be in that pull, isn't it? Because it's just so
Yes,
much
it is.
easier.
That's where we want to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you add the push behind it, oh, you're running, right? That's a great
Yeah.
product. So we basically saying it's a product market fit. But like if we put in the fancy keywords, it would be
Yeah.
have a good product market fit, right?
And I think people will, that's an interesting way to phrase it because that's a common way for investors to talk about it. Do you have PMF? Do you have product market fit? And we talk about product market fit as something that's quite uncommon, right? It's
Mm.
most businesses don't achieve great product market fit. And I would even go as far as saying businesses that I have worked for that have been quite successful, I think that you could challenge the product market fit and say, do you really have this dialed? Because I think that true product market fit will be pulled for. Whereas if it's not quite the right fit, you're going to be pushing it and it's going to be more brute force.
So the litmus test is effectively, can you say that you're getting pulled? Hence, you have product market fit. Otherwise,
You've really nailed
it's
it. Yeah. I
debatable.
I mean, it's a spectrum, right? But I would say you've really nailed it if the customers are pulling for it.
I love that. That's such a simple way to explain it, but I think you landed that very well. I'm enjoying it. Thanks for that,
Thank you.
Ryan. So
Yeah.
let's take a step back into your career. So I got this one. When you think back on your career, Qualtrics route, or even early GRIN, was there a moment when you realized that staying in your lane just wasn't working for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I would go to the first time I really experienced that was at Qualtrics. And
Mm,
I got very uncomfortable. And the reason for that is I was working directly with our co-founder at
mhm,
Qualtrics, and he was putting a tremendous amount of pressure on myself, who was a engineering manager at the time,
mhm,
and my product manager. And the problem that we had was that our customers were essentially not pulling for a particular product. We were building text analytics at the time. This was back in 2014. At the time, text analytics was very basic natural language process, nothing like what we have today, right? Like the ability to talk to a computer and AI today is mind blowing compared to where we were just a decade ago.
yeah.
Um, but we were building text analytics features, and we were particularly focusing on sentiment analysis. So, what was the sentiment of the person that wrote this particular text? Were they happy or mad, or you feeling some emotion? And then we were
Mhm,
doing topic analysis. What are they talking about? And then the best was when we could tie the two together. How do they feel about what they're talking about? That's ultimately what we were trying to achieve. And the reason for that is our customers often had millions of people writing these free form comments into their surveys, and they wanted to know what are they talking about and how do they feel about it. Well, we built a feature to do topic analysis and sentiment analysis, and it it didn't land right. It
mm,
was too technically focused. It was too complicated. It was exposing these complicated models, bag of word models, and sophisticated like algorithms to the customer that we were quite impressed with. We're like, this is the latest and greatest. This is the best thing that you can
mhm,
get. And the customer, yeah, I remember being on the phone at one point with one of our customers, and they said, this is really cool, but
mhm,
I don't know how I'm going to use this to drive actual like decisions and value in my company. And that was like kind of a little bit of a gut punch, to be honest, because we had spent tremendous amount of time building it. We were very proud of it as an engineering and product team of what we had built. And I remember my co-founder at that time came back to me and put a tremendous amount of pressure on me and said, basically, you're building a poor product and you're not understanding what our customers' needs or problems are. And honestly, my immediate reaction to that was, I'm building what the product manager asked me to build.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm building, and he said, the design is crap. And I said, I'm building what the designers spec'd in the design. I'm building what I've been asked to build, and not only that, but I'm building it with like the latest and greatest tech. So I felt quite shocked and confused by the feedback, and uncomfortable with the feedback, because he was pushing me to step outside of the box that I sat in, which was, as an engineer, you get product requirements from a product manager, you get design requirements from a designer, and you build those things. And he was challenging me to say, go build something that the customers actually want.
So let's
And
dig into that,
yeah,
Ryan. Let's just go in that. Like, why a solid, as you describe it, a solid engineering work doesn't mean adoption. Like in so many cases, it just doesn't mean that. And I had the same, Ryan. I remember being head of engineering in a startup. I literally thought a good engineering solutions, good cloud, clean code and fast deployments and everything, like somehow gonna translate into adoption. And it doesn't. Like the
yeah,
customer at the end of the day, I mean, they don't give a shit. Something in their
yeah,
hands. If it works, if it solves my problem, that's what I'm paying for. What's behind it, right? Like they don't care. And but
oh yeah.
engineers seem to be in that, like, not really not registering that. Like your point of view, like why is that? It's like why we have that?
Honestly, I think it's a, a lack of empathy. Like, it's like everyone is busy, everyone feels pressure,
Mm.
everyone's trying to meet a certain expectation
Yeah.
and drive, the best outcomes for themselves personally, their family. They all have their own personal motivations. um, I think people naturally gravitate towards doing the things that they believe will deliver the best outcome to themselves. um, but
Okay.
I think that it's a lot of work. So as an engineer, I know when because I'm still actively coding. I know
All
that
right.
when I'm actually, actively building something, it is hard to put the problem down and go and ask questions. In fact, it's like there's like an ego attached to what I'm building. Don't tell me this is wrong. I'm really
Mm.
proud about what I just built. I don't want to hear that this is wrong, because I just dumped a ton of time and energy into this thing. I don't want to hear that it's wrong. But not
Yeah.
only do I not want to hear that it's wrong, I don't want to be told to do something different, because maybe I don't have time to do something different. Maybe I'm already behind on the task that I'm building. Maybe there's expectations that I get this done, for my team, my sprint, whatever I'm working on.
Yeah.
I just think it's hard to get your head outside of the, the sea of expectations that you have, and go focus on something else. Because in order to truly understand your customer, you have to understand their world. You have to understand what are what pressure do they feel? What are their expectations? What are they trying to solve for? And am I actually helping them do it? Am I actually solving a problem that they have, or am I just, you know, making assumptions that I know what they're feeling and building to those assumptions, but those assumptions are wrong. And
Mm.
that's what happened with me, when I was building this text analytics feature. Was I was making assumptions that I understood their problem and that I understood what they wanted, because we had talked about it, and intuitively, oh yeah, I know what text analytics is. I know what sentiment analysis is. And, the, working closely with this founder, like I said, he kept coming back to me. I'd run a proof of concept by him, or a prototype, and
Mhm.
he would say, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And I would go back. Here's another version. Here's another version. Here's another version. And it was just wrong, 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 wrong. Um,
Mm.
and you know, at one point I changed the the talk track with him. I said, hey, I clearly am missing the point here. I want to, in fact, the reason I said that was because he said, I'm losing confidence that you and this team is capable of building this product. I'm going to have to go acquire a company to meet the
Oh,
customer's need.
damn, that's not a
The,
good feedback, right? Like
the,
that
it
hits the
stung.
heart, right?
Well,
Yeah.
and he made it personal too, because he's like, that's going to be 10% of my equity or something.
Yeah.
Like 10% of my equity is of the business, and your equity is going to go to acquiring another business so that we can do this problem right. And
Hmm.
that's where
So,
I followed up and said, look, I've lost your
mm,
confidence. I want to earn your confidence. I want to understand here. I want to step outside of what we've been doing and try this from a different approach. And that's where he pushed me to basically change the altitude, level up, and get outside the box.
okay. So I have two ones here, right? So I'm putting myself into your position, and I just don't. I just feel like I'm becoming this defensive and almost like a evasive in that feedback. I would be probably be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm being told, right? Like, is that not a product situation, right? Like, if you're not happy what I'm building, go have a chat with the product, because I'm just realizing their vision, and I instantly would go like, why do I need to do that, right? And I have this I did basically research on that, and I found a great thread on Reddit really going after that, right? And if you
Mm.
summarize basically all what guys were saying, they basically go like this: it's not our job, okay? So the product
Yep.
and go to market belongs to product and sales. Leave us alone. We'll give you a product which is scalable, maintainable, it runs.
Yep.
Don't force us to cross these lanes, right? Like, but what we saying, hey, this is gonna limit your growth, isn't it? Like, that's
Yeah.
gonna limit your growth. It's gonna have impact on your credibility, how you seen in the business if you don't talk that language, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. I'd say the best way to describe it, for a company that produces software as its product, it is very hard to get a like ideal to achieve like an ideal outcome when the people actually building it don't understand what they're building or why, if it's to a spec. And the reason is the people designing the spec aren't the builders usually. They don't, and they don't know necessarily
Mm-hmm.
what's even possible to build. Like the reality, and this is one of the reasons I would say
Mm-hmm.
that as engineers grow into, you know, having larger impact, through management roles or ideally cross-functional roles, um, never stop coding, never fully exit, because the only way to really build the best product is to be very in touch with what's possible. Um, and if you're not in touch with what's possible, then how do you achieve an ideal outcome? And when you're just taking a spec from somebody who's probably not in touch with what's possible, and you don't, and the engineers don't think about what they're actually trying to accomplish, then there's this chasm between, like, there's just, I'd say, let's just call it a missed opportunity
Mm.
of, if the person building the product knew what they were trying to actually accomplish, not to a spec, but to a customer problem, then they would likely build something better. Then they would solve the problem better
Mm-hmm.
than they would if they just took, the requirements and stayed in their lane.
Yeah.
Um, so, I look at companies where the leader of the company is a builder and very technical, and I think you get better outcomes. I think you get better outcomes when the person who is setting direction, or when the people who are setting direction understand in detail what they're asking their teams to do, and can sit down next to them and participate, at the end of the day, if they need to.
Mm. I love that, and I fully agree. What I'm thinking is, Ryan, as well, is like, how did that translate, like in enterprises? Does it matter which environment you are in? Does it matter if you're like in a startup or like scale up or like a proper enterprise? Or we saying it's really environment independent? If you are engineer, you will have product people in your team, and then you will have product coming down to the team, or programs in enterprises. You still want to develop that skill of being able to talk with product around go to markets and really understand
Mm.
the customer, what you're building, why you're building, and only then actually go and build it.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I describe the relationship between product and engineering to my teams is as these like circles that overlap.
Mm,
Where it's, and every organization is going to be a little bit different, and the relationship between any two people will be a little bit different. But I would say that the degree of overlap of those circles of responsibilities may be a little, but it should potentially be a lot. And so if I look back to one of the best product manager relationships and partnerships I ever had, it was this woman, Jamie. And Jamie at Qualtrics and I really overlapped heavily in
mhm.
what we did. There were times where I was getting on the phone with the customer and learning in place of her. There was times where she was working closely with my team and often doing things that you would consider an engineering manager should do. And I would say the two of us were a partnership. And as a partnership, we were trying to achieve an outcome. Qualtrics actually um, developed this concept of the team of four, and they took a product manager, an engineering leader, a marketing leader, and a sales leader, and basically partnered them up as like a mini executive team for a product or business line. And that team
That's
of
amazing.
four was, responsible for the ultimate outcome of of that particular business line, and that was quite successful. It really pushed every member of that team, who were typically manager to director level people, to think about more than just their function, to partner as an executive team trying to accomplish a particular outcome. Um,
I
so
love that. Yeah, I can see
yeah,
that working very well. I mean, when I think about startups and when I think about founding members, I usually think about that four. I go
yeah,
like, I would not join any startup if you don't have that four nailed. That's
yeah,
such a fundamental functions to get anything off the ground into successful mode. I want to read this quote, Ryan, to just land the point, right? So, according to research from the OKR Institute and Gartner, in companies with silo teams, so effectively we're saying teams which don't cross the lanes, productivity drops nearly 29%, job satisfaction slips 37%, and entire departments usually duplicate effort, sometimes wasting around 10% of the operational budget. So
yeah,
it's a very costly mistake to sort of assume that staying in your lane is a great
yeah.
choice for yourself and for the business overall.
I would actually, I would, through my own experiences, I would argue that that's quite conservative. That
Oh, you would
it's probably much
you would
more.
just go bigger, bigger
Yeah,
numbers, bigger
yeah,
numbers. Okay.
probably
Yeah.
much more, because I've just seen over and over and over again businesses that I've been that I've been a leader of,
Mm,
where departments, or groups within departments, are their daily operating rhythms are are built around deficiencies of other departments, like the deficiencies in the product, deficiencies in um, support material, deficiencies in you know you know lack of functionality, or like bugs, or whatever it ends up being. It's like whole teams' processes get built around these things. And sometimes you take a step back and you question, why are we doing this? And nobody really knows.
mm,
Well, it's what we've always done.
yep.
And like what I've found is, GRIN, as an example, is a company that at one point was quite a bit larger than it is today. And we ran into some what I would call product market fit challenges,
Mhm.
where you know originally we had great product market fit. Over time, as we expanded, the product market fit we had with that expanded customer base was not as strong. And, the reality is, like, as a large team trying to push through that, and I would say we were in a moment early for GRIN, we were getting pulled. Later in GRIN, we were trying to push. And,
Okay.
teams were just building all sorts of band-aids. I would say many departments were kind of a house of cards. And yeah, I had to look under the covers and ask, what is going on here?
Hmm.
And you realize just how much inefficiency is happening on a daily basis, and how much, like, bad process upon bad process, upon bad process is layering on top of, something more fundamental down below that nobody's paying attention to.
Hmm.
And and so, anyways, it's that kind of goes back to the point of one, like, oftentimes the root cause may exist in a different department, but if you don't care about that department and that department's not your job, then nobody will ever solve it. and
Exactly.
and it just propagates and,
Yeah.
becomes something that the business adapts to.
It just becomes a norm, and that norm is just, it's really not healthy. But because it becomes a norm, you don't really realize that you have that
Yeah.
exposure somewhere. It's somewhere deep. Yeah, I get you. So, well, take us through the moment when you, this engineering manager in Qualtrics, so maybe different situation, but you realize like you have to cross the lane, right? And so, how does that crossing the lane actually happen to you? Like, did you when learn about go to markets, did you start spending more time with sales or marketing? How did you actually improved yourself and you
Yeah.
crossed that lane?
Yeah. I'll tell you. Um, so the first time I can remember that happening was back at Qualtrics, when the founder was pressuring me to figure out how to build the right product, not just build the product I was being asked to build. So that was
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm being pushed to do something that isn't like my job spec. My job spec as an engineer is to build, to build software. Now you're asking me to build the right software, and it made me uncomfortable. But it was good. It was a good, it was a good feeling
Mhm.
of uncomfort. Um, I would say I don't feel like I actually really understood it until my paycheck depended on it. To be honest, and
I get you.
and and so, like I said, I think that human nature, to some degree, we all have so much going on in our life that we end up filtering the things that don't feel necessary. And so, if it's not necessary for me to learn this thing, I've got a million other things to learn, and so I'm not going to learn it. But if it's necessary, then suddenly that changes. And, in terms of just living everyday life, it's necessary when my paycheck depends on it. It's necessary when my job depends on it, when I'm bonused on it, right? And
Okay.
so, even as a CTO at Route, I had a very strong go to market partner, and so it wasn't my job. Not that I didn't care about it. I was an executive at the company, so I cared about the team's performance. But when the company was feeling go to market pressure, that was my partner's problem, more so than mine. And he took it on, and he solved it. Um, but he would have solved it better had I been a better partner of his, in truth. And so, when I joined GRIN as the CTO, we also had go to market challenges. Now, before I really got to spend much time at the company and try to understand what they were, we ended up making a pretty big shift, and I became the company's president. And as the president, suddenly net revenue retention, our net ARR, our monthly and quarterly sales numbers, those were mine. Those were my
Mhm.
numbers. And in fact, I remember sitting in a board meeting once where we announced that my role was changing. And one of the board observers looked at me and said, "Have you ever run go to market before?
Mhm.
Have you ever been responsible for the sales number?" And I said, "No." And he just, you know, he's like, "It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure."
Yeah.
Um, and what I thought in that moment was, this partner, Charlie, that I had spent years working with. I remember Charlie, who was chief revenue officer at Route and then later at GRIN. I remember Charlie saying, I constantly have a target on my back every single month, every single quarter. Nobody in the company feels the stress that I feel.
Hmm.
And I sympathized, but I didn't empathize with that. I said, yeah, you do. That's got to be tough. Well, once I was in charge, then I could truly empathize.
Hmm.
Now that's my responsibility. Now I'm thinking about product, not from the sense of how do I build this like really cool thing that I'm interested in, but like if I don't build the right product, then I will fail to deliver on this company's core objectives. And then I personally fail in my role. And so that shifted everything for me.
Okay.
And it,
Well,
yeah.
let let me ask this, Ryan, about credibility. So I'll take it a little bit maybe down to like a engineering manager type of roles, maybe even like engineers themselves. I feel like if you bring, ability to talk around go to markets with other departments or other teams like sales and marketing, I feel like people will look you at you in a much better and more credible sort of light. So you become not just a doer, an executor of tasks, but you become, in a way, a partner for them
Mm,
to get answers to and make decisions, and you make them better, right? Because you can
yeah.
just explain what's possible. So I think like if you're thinking about your career growth, that should be something you should be interested in because that's just going to grow your credibility within any organization. Am I right over here, or your point of view is a little bit different?
No, you're very right. I do think that I think that as an engineering leader, you should design how the team works in a way where that's a requirement. Um, if you're not within an organization where that's a requirement, then I think you should take the opportunity to as much as you can. Now, today in within GRIN, we actually don't have product managers today. What I do think that we're evolving, and AI is changing things. I think we're seeing a convergence of these. It's like you go back not that long ago and you kind of take some of the like agile best practices and the role descriptions, and it's like you've got product managers, project managers, product owners, scrum masters. Like it's this very like um very detailed explanation of the different roles and responsibilities that play a part in an organization. And I just look at that today as like it is not the right way to do it anymore, right? And like
Mhm.
that's very much where you get a spec as an engineer and you build to the spec, and then you've got a product owner who is responsible for like the backlog and prioritization, and you've got a product manager who's responsible for talking to the customers, and it's it's like playing the game of telephone. Every person that's involved in their own isolated way, there's a loss of fidelity in the transfer of knowledge between one person to the next. And ultimately, what ends up getting created is some less than ideal, product that misses on like the true intent of the person who actually understood what the customer needed. Um, and so
Mm.
I would say today, I recently talked to in fact, some of my engineers, they were like, "Hey, we don't have a designer. We're not designers. What do we do?" And I said, "Why are you not a designer? Like, and they, what should we build? Well, what does the customer need?" And I mean, it's uncomfortable. I'll be honest. It's uncomfortable for an engineer to be asked the question of, well, what does the customer need? Uh, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
don't know.
Right.
Yeah. You tell me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What is what design's going to be the best? I
Yeah.
don't know. Well, go use the damn product. Does it work well? Is it, like, if you use it, in fact, how many engineers, this is actually funny because, some of what I think are one of the first mature AI products, in my opinion, besides chat that has come out is code editors.
Mm-hmm.
Code it like Cursor or Claude Code or some of
Yep.
these, different coding tools. And, in my opinion, I haven't been told this, but my intuition here is that because software engineers are like, oh, I could use this to like be quicker at my job. And so they build it for themselves. They are the end user. And so they build a great product for themselves. And when they're using it and they say, I don't like this,
Mm,
they fix it. Well,
yeah.
if this doesn't feel right, then let's just change it. Let's make it better. Well, when a software engineer is building for somebody who they don't understand, then they lack the ability to say, this isn't a good design, because they don't understand actually what the customer's trying to accomplish. And they lack the ability to know whether or not they've really nailed, the requirements, because
Mhm.
they're not the user. And this is where empathy plays in. You may not suddenly become, GRIN builds marketing software. Engineers may not suddenly become marketing experts. However, there's a lot that engineers can do to understand what what are our customers trying to accomplish? What are they accountable to? And if I use the product with that mindset, is it easy to use? Is it hard to use? Is it
Yeah.
accomplishing the goal? And if it's not, how can we fix it? And it's been amazing to see, honestly, back end engineers, people that say, I build APIs,
Mhm.
I create distributed systems, I design architectures. It has been amazing to watch these people build user interfaces. In fact, one of them recently posted a commented on somewhere on LinkedIn, I think on one of my posts, and said, um, made some comment about how he was essentially a newbie at building React code, but kind of said it in a lighthearted way of like, hey, I typically write software, server side with Golang, and I'm using JavaScript and building React user interfaces right now. And
Okay.
like, to me, that is an engineer that is stepping outside of their comfort zone,
Yeah.
is like taking on the true goal in mind versus just what they're being told to do, and saying, okay, I've got to like, I've got to, I've got to go build a product that our customers are going to use.
Mm.
And that has to push me outside of what I'm accustomed to doing.
So in tactical way, then what we're saying is use the product that will help you to understand if the product works, which most likely going to make better decisions on whatever you're building right now. Is there any other way of how engineers willing to step outside their siloed ways can get that that language, that go to market understanding, their customer feelings
Yeah.
understood? Or is it that's like the only way, or are we
No,
saying go? Yep.
go use it. Absolutely. I think that's one of the best ways. But if you're not going to use it, well,
Mm.
you should find a way to definitely use it. Everybody should find a way to use their product. But in addition to using the product, watch people use it. We use some tools internally so we can record
Right.
uh,
Okay.
customer demos.
Yep.
We can record customer use. Watch people use it. That is like
Hmm.
very eye opening to see people struggle to find the button that you put in the upper right hand corner, or struggle to like realize that you have to click that pencil and then you can edit this thing that's over here. It's like,
Mm.
oh, yeah, okay, I guess that's not as intuitive as I thought. Right. So
Okay.
watch it, and then talk to customers. You know, I, I don't believe there's a way to develop empathy for your customer if you don't meet them. If you don't meet them, talk to them, watch them use the product. And then I
But
don't think that yeah, go ahead.
how you set this up, Ryan? Is like how do you get your engineers if you have I don't know, 50 of them or 100 of them talking with the customers? Is there some type of like meet the customer day where something gets slotted in their diaries? Can we trust them that they will, present a good vision of a business and they're not gonna, join with, I don't know, some poor language and talk with the customer in a bad way or something
Yeah.
like that? It's like, is that like okay? Like, do you guys have a process of how you get engineers into like talking with the customers?
I've seen it in a variety of ways. But that the simplest way is, let's say, maybe the product manager owns the relationship, or maybe it's an account manager that owns the relationship. And
Hmm.
hey, we're going to meet this customer, we're going to give them a demo, we're going to get some feedback, whatever it ends up being.
Right. Okay. So they
Simply
just chat
say,
for the session,
yeah,
right?
hey,
Okay.
we're going to invite a couple of engineers to join this call.
Hmm.
um, I've only ever seen customers react positively to that. Cool. Sounds good. Like, it, and if the engineers aren't comfortable talking, then they don't have to. They can
Hmm.
just observe. They can just be a fly on the wall. I've seen a lot of engineers actually really enjoy those customer calls. And, I think starting to get to know people is how you start to build empathy for them, and how you start to think about things in a different way. So I get engineers on the call 100%, and as to as much degree as they are comfortable. But in addition to that, get, get recorded demos, require that engineers watch people try to use the product. So
Hmm.
it everywhere from, one, meet the customer, like get to know them by name, see, how impactful what you're building for is for them, or not. Two, observe, outside of a direct conversation, observe just use patterns. Make sure you're recording this stuff, make sure you're watching it. And then probably three, go use it yourself. Find a reason to use it.
Hmm.
I've met many executives, um, which honestly is a bit, people might find this surprising, not surprising, or somewhere in between. But I have met many executives that do not know how to use the product that they sell.
Mm, not good.
And is, you know, it's like, well, these are the reasons that these, like, ways of working that are inefficient or broken never get identified, is because there's just somebody who's thinking about the problem at the right level has a lack of detail of how things actually work, to understand that the way things are working aren't actually working very well.
Okay.
Um, so
Um, so I love that, by the way, those three things. And if I'm engineer, if I'm, listening to this chat, I I want to cross the lanes. I want to increase my credibility. I'm just going right now to product people and going like, where's the recordings? I want to watch it. If there's no recordings, put me in those demo calls. Like, put
yeah,
me in those sales calls. Like, I want to shadow this. I want to understand our
yeah,
customers because I want to bring that knowledge and make better, make better solutions. That's a very good move to make to any engineers looking to cross these lanes. So I
yeah.
have this question. Let's say that you have some type of old school. I don't know why I'm saying old school, not necessarily old school, don't care about customers, but you have a certain team or a certain mindset, right? Where the belief is that their value is good code, clean code, good technical solutions. How do we actually go changing that mindset so they start thinking about like adoption and revenue and stuff? Do we do, I don't know, coaching or some type of presentations, but we want to shift their mindset, so we want to sort of enable them and gently push towards, hey guys, we really want you to sort of start talking more business values and outcomes than just thinking about code. Like, how do you get that done in practice?
I so I think the ideal way to do it is to invite, to invite that to happen, and to make opportunities for that to happen. I
Mm.
think the ultimate way to do it is with, not a carrot but a stick. So it's like, let's start with a carrot, right? Like, hey, we'd really love to start getting engineers onto our sales calls, or
Mm.
on, passively, like, either like observing, or um or watching recordings, we'd love to get engineers into customer demos. We'd love to get engineers into customer feedback sessions. And, just invite it at first. Hey, we're doing this demo. Who wants to be a part of it? I think that you can see that a lot of this can happen culturally. So as the culture of the company and the engineering processes evolve, it becomes a common practice. It becomes something that ultimately what you'd like to see people understand is that by doing that, they will be able to do a better job. And again, like I said, ultimately, we're all intrinsically motivated in some way. People have to believe that it's going to be better for them if they do it, or they won't do it, especially if it makes them uncomfortable, right? There's some quote, I don't know where it comes from, but people basically resist pain until resist change until the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of changing. And that's like, well, if I'm an engineer that it has not frequently interacted with customers, and if that makes me uncomfortable, then it is painful to start meeting them. It's uncomfortable, and we resist uncomfort unless there is some benefit of that comfort, uncomfortability that ultimately is better for us. And so I would say start culturally. At the end of the day, you can make it a requirement. Hey, you have to.
So that's a stick, right? So the carrot
Yeah.
is like, hey, that first part that's gonna help you grow career and all that stuff. But if people are not listening, they're not joining the calls. We whip up the stick and we go like, that's now part of your job, basically.
Yeah.
Do it.
And you can just establish like, hey, at in this organization, at this company, it is part of the job expectation that that engineers meet with our customers, that you use our product, that you whatever. And if people aren't aligned with those expectations, that's okay too. In fact, I'll just, this is a different example, but it's similar. Recently, we made the shift to a heavier adoption of AI tooling for coding. And we started with a carrot. So for a while we said, hey, everyone now has a license to use Cursor, and we encourage you to try it. And once a week, we're going to do these like engineering, brown bag sessions where everyone comes and talks about what they learned, how they're using AI more effectively now in their daily process. And I think we did that for 3 to 4 months or so. And over that period of time, we actually, leadership, myself and other of the engineering, not just managers, other of the senior engineers said, this is great. Like this should be something that we are all using. And it started to become more of an expectation. Okay, now you have to do this. And I remember a great engineer on my team said, Ryan, I want to talk with you. And I actually recruited him from another company. So I know him quite well. And he said, I'm quitting GRIN because I'm not comfortable with the expectations of that we have, the pressure that I have to use AI in coding.
Okay.
I don't want to. And I don't like feeling the pressure that I have to. And, I was like, hey, as your CEO, best of luck. And, as a friend of yours, which I am a friend of his, I said, and as a fellow engineer, I think you're making the wrong choice.
I would agree.
And I think that I would encourage you to kind of understand why you're resisting it so much. Maybe you feel vulnerable to it. Maybe something, but I'd encourage you to understand that, because I believe that in a handful of years, maybe even less, it's happening rapidly. Engineers that do not have developed a proficiency for using AI tools will have a hard time getting jobs, because it is, you will be able to be so much more effective. Well, so the interesting part of that story is that he came knocking back on the door 2 weeks later and said, I made a mistake, and I hired him back. And so he's like, hey, you're right, I made a mistake. And
He probably just tried it first for 2 weeks. Maybe he
yeah,
never tried it. Then she gave a proper go. It's like, damn, that's good.
that's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I remember my first handful of weeks using AI code editors was like, is like dumping, a 5 gallon bucket on you. It's like, at first it's
It's
like, holy,
excellent.
oh, wow, I
Yeah,
can be so effective. And then all of a sudden, oh
yeah,
my God, it made so many mistakes. And then it's kind of back to, okay, now I know how to use it effectively.
yeah.
Um,
It takes time
but,
to
but it,
learn it. Yeah, but it's awesome, Ryan. I think, yeah, you're definitely right when you say that in a couple of years the market will expect that to be a skill.
it'll demand it.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's very evident. I fell back in love with building stuff because of AI. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't code, for probably like 7 years now, and it's all, it's all managerial type of roles. But then AI came out, and I bought into these tools, and I was like, damn, that's fine, right? You just stick with it, you just build stuff, things are happening, you're like, ooh, I'm back in love with just producing stuff. Yeah,
Uh,
it's
so
it
I,
really,
same story. And I think, there's probably a period of 3 or 4 years where I didn't write code. I wrote code a lot. So I wrote code. I was managing 100 engineers at Qualtrics, and I was still writing code. At Route for the first couple of years, I wrote a lot of code. Um, but then, my kind of the demands on me as a CTO got large, and I just ended up stopping. And then you stop for very long, and then it's like it's a lot of work to get back into it. Now it's like, I used to use Angular and like these front end, develop like development, um, like patterns and things that have evolved. Nobody uses Angular anymore. Like everybody's
mm,
using React, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't even, now I got to go learn React. And it's just like the barrier to entry felt large, where AI has just, no, barrier to entry is not large.
yeah.
You actually don't need to be a pro at React to use AI and write good React code. You can actually just learn how React works, and you can work in partnership with AI and do it really effectively. Um,
Mm.
but
It's so
the whole point
lovely.
of that, the whole
Just,
point of saying that was that it it is going to be uncomfortable, and I think an organization should start by encouraging, but ultimately I think organizations need to adopt a culture of expectation that your engineers are developing these skills. I think it should be a requirement.
I 100% agree. I mean, I don't need to code. To be honest, it's all just hobbies and things like that. But I really enjoy the feeling of just, almost like, being Tony Stark in in Iron Man, because I
Yeah,
just have a microphone. I just enable voice. I go like, build me this and that. I want to do this, and it just spits out the code. You see things working, and then you start just sort of talking with AI, and you see product coming. Of this, of how
yeah,
far you can push it, like you can really build a full big SaaS platforms, but micro SaaS platforms, which is right now on the rise. It's all called vibe coding, or
yeah.
vibe sprints. So it's, I mean, it's as real as it gets, man. If you
Oh
just
yeah,
give it a go, you will very quickly realize that if you
yeah,
add another couple of years on this new wave of building things, it's just gonna be something else. And then, yeah, if you just say no to it, it's just gonna be left behind, man. It's just like
yeah.
it's gonna be your loss,
Oh,
effectively.
it'd be like an engineer today saying, "I only code in assembly language," and trying to get a job. It's like,
Yeah.
well,
Good
there
luck.
are some jobs, there
Yeah.
are maybe some niche jobs, but the reality is that 99.9% of jobs will not hire you if you only code in assembly language. And that will happen here too. There
Mm.
may be some niche applications, maybe, but the vast majority of jobs will expect that you are using it. You'll have to, because it just like, going from assembly to a modern programming language, there's orders of magnitude of efficiency improvements. You'll see the same
Mm.
with AI. There will be orders
Yeah.
of magnitude of efficiency improvements.
100%. We drifted a little bit into AI from
Yeah.
the go-to markets, but I think it's a very important as well. Crossing the lanes, and to your point, which you made in the very beginning when I asked about mastering tech growth, you said professional growth,
Yeah.
and that would be something where engineers listening should just not ignore. And if you're using AI, well, good for you. Continue learning that skill.
Yeah.
As many talks I had as well, in the show, we have close to 100 episodes. Last 20 or so, a lot of AI. We actually had businesses who do professional services with vibe coding, and they
Mm,
develop new processes where they just iterate so quickly on the product features and
yeah.
with AI that it takes like a week or two, and they have dedicated vibe sprinting, as they call, where they just get like four people coming together, very skilled with AI. It's UX and UI,
Yeah.
and then there's a front end and back end, and they just build small products and small features, and they just ship it. They get very quick feedback loops, and that just allows to build it, find that market fit, and build better products much much faster. And I mean,
Right.
if you are a business owner, you sitting, you go like, damn, like I'm just gonna launch two new verticals next year. Or so
Right.
it's definitely gonna have that. I want to ask this, Ryan. So if I'm this engineer which is crossing lane, I'm now part of these demos, how can we help engineers to think through this process in such a way that they ask the right questions, or or ask something of like product people, where they go like, look, I'm asking these questions, so I'm getting the right answers, and that helps me to build the right things. Is there like a framework you would use, or just some tips around that area?
I don't have a preferred framework. What I would
Mm.
always start, and if the engineers aren't comfortable, have the product manager or somebody who's on the phone start by making sure that the customer explains their job and what they're responsible for. Like, I think if you don't really understand why somebody's using your product, then it's hard to ask smart questions, because you may be observing their use, but you lack the full picture to know ultimately what they're trying to do, and therefore it's hard to be smart about it. But lay the foundation. Hey, I'm such and such person. I'm responsible for these things. I use this product for this reason, and and then I think it depends on it depends on the point of the call, if it's a demo or a feedback session, or what it is. But I would say that the true goal at the end of the day is to understand, how can this software better solve the problems that they have. Um,
Hmm.
so how and I like to so actually I do have a framework. I like to use this kind of value framework, where you think about the true value of any product or service that we sell is the combination of a handful of things. One of those is the 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 perceived the perceived likelihood that using this thing will accomplish the outcome. So, does the customer believe that this tool is going to achieve what you're trying to what they're trying to achieve? And if it even if it does, but they don't believe it, that matters. And so how can you help them to be more confident that using this software, or using your product is going to help them? Um,
Hmm.
Another is like, to what degree does the product actually help them achieve what is their ideal outcome? So if you're building, let's say, GRIN builds we build marketing software to help companies work with influencer marketers. Let's say the ideal outcome is GMV, like the total amount of sales that an influencer is able to drive. So the ideal outcome is to make GMV as high as possible. Okay, well then, how likely does the customer believe that will happen? So it's kind of those two. One, what is their ideal outcome? What is their confidence level that you can do it? And then the other two things are, what is the time delay? How long does it take to do it? And then what is the effort that has to be applied in order to do it? So all these things come together, because if the time delay, it's like, oh, I can do it, it'll just take a year. Well, then the value's less, right?
Hmm.
Well, I can do it, but I have to put 100 hours into operating, clicking buttons. Well, then the value is less, right? Or I can't actually get you to your number, but I can get you to 10% of your number. Okay, well then the value is less. And I can get you there, but the customer doesn't believe it. Again, the value is less. And so ultimately, we're trying to help the customer we're trying to increase the value of the product in your customer's mind. And I think you can approach it from all of those angles. If the customer's concerned about how much effort it is, why isn't so much effort? How long does it take you? How like, every day, what's your process? What are you doing? You might observe that your customer is doing things that you're like, oh, I never realized it would be used that way. I've seen that numerous times where it's like, oh my God, this is way inefficient for what they're trying to do. I could probably make that way better. I didn't realize they were going to use it that way. Right.
Hmm.
Or, hey, this thing, I have to wait 3 weeks for this thing to be done. I have to have it, it's got to be done in 2 days. Okay, well then we've got to rethink this. If it has to be done faster, then how do we do that? If the customer just says, I don't, take text analytics. We were observing sentiment, and back in the day, today you ask ChatGPT, what is the sentiment of this sentence? It will almost always, like, it's, I think most people would say, I have confidence it will be right.
Yeah.
Even with like sarcasm and slang, like it's right. It's almost always right. At that point in time, 85% was like a pretty good benchmark of accuracy. And so then the customer would say, I don't have confidence that it's going to be correct. Well, that's a problem. How do we boost your confidence? How can we change the product, layer more, more ability for you to observe where it might not be right, and maybe allow you to correct it? So, all of these different things, I would say, find the value that is going to be the largest driver of value in that customer's mind, and then ask questions about it. How do we make it faster? How do we increase your confidence? How do we reduce the amount of effort? How do we make sure the ideal outcome is better? Every one of those, I think, could turn into a series of questions that help any software engineer, product manager, other, really expand their mind into like, oh, okay, I know how to make this better. I know how to increase the value.
Is this framework a value framework? Is that just something you develop from experience purely, or is it something based like on a book or
No,
like a?
this is actually Alex Hormozy.
Oh, Alex Armozy. Okay, I know
Yeah, so
that.
he has a I like I forget the name of his website, but you could search it up. He actually has quite a bit of content on that value framework, and I just think it's such a simple explanation of the different ways in which you can increase value, and each one of those core variables, parameters in that equation, could be entire conversations with the customer, and
Mhm.
could just be a series of questions. And the reality is, modifying any one of those parameters increases the value. If the amount of time goes down, the value goes up. If the amount of like effort goes down, the value goes up. If the perceived confidence goes up, the value goes up. If the ideal outcome goes up, the value goes up.
Goes up.
And but it's four distinct, really topics that could have very different conversations about. And an engineer or a product manager can now evaluate value creation from four very distinct points of view. And ultimately, I think that gives you a more comprehensive understanding of things that you have the potential to create.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Ryan. We'll put it in the show notes for our listeners, the link to that Alex Hermosi write-up or value framework. That's going to be a great help, I'm sure about that. So let's jump in the rapid questions, Ryan. So it's 30, 60 seconds per question.
Okay.
What's one business book you think every engineer should read?
Ooh. So there's a couple that have been really impactful to me. One, I love Radical Candor.
Ooh, that's a good one. Feedback, right?
It I was an engineer. I was just a person in general that I would say
Mhm.
was a bit of a people pleaser and avoided conflict. And
Okay.
I learned through reading that book, and just through some personal, examples in my life, that avoiding conflict was actually pretty selfish, and led to less ideal outcomes both for myself and the people where there may be some conflict with. So I think that's an incredible book. And then the other one is Crucial Conversations. And obviously both of these books are related to basically human interaction, which I think is so critical. Crucial Conversations is, how do you have hard conversations with people? We all have to do it in our personal lives, in our professional lives. And there is a framework for how to do it more effectively. And just one of the most profound books that I've personally read, because it is so easy to slip into emotional, reactive behavior in those conversations, and it's just unproductive. And so that, having a framework in your head allows you to take a big deep breath and realize, okay,
Follow
let's
the framework.
navigate this differently. Yeah.
Yep. Into leadership.
Um, I, so from my personal opinion, the biggest myth is that you have to be a manager to progress in your career. That's what I've observed, and that's how you make the most money. I've always led organizations to say, you can advance in your career to the same level, regardless of whether you manage people or not. But ultimately, increasing your compensation is attached to increasing your impact. And increasing your impact means you're having, an impact over a broader group of people, a broader influence of the product. And so leadership is required regardless. You can't advance in your career, even as I would say a senior engineer is a leader of other engineers. A principal
Yep.
engineer is a leader. A senior principal, like, it's just there is always an expectation that to advance in your career, you have to develop leadership skills. And whether that be directed towards people management or a technical track, that it's a requirement. So the myth, you don't have to become a manager, but the other side of that is you do have to be a leader.
Yeah. And it is a big difference between a good leader, which is capable to multiply talent around him, and a leader who either just doesn't know how to do leadership and from his or her best intents still somehow manages to diminish people around himself. That's
Yeah,
a good book, which is called Multipliers by Liz.
it is good.
And yeah, it just goes into that concept so well that when you read it, you can see yourself, you can see your colleagues, previous managers, and you go like, damn, like they like they did that and they were coming from good intentions, but how they deliver these things were quite
Yeah,
diminishing to everyone around. And you can feel that in like team dynamics and
yeah,
how the team feels
absolutely.
and that things. Yeah. All right. Which skill helped you more as a CEO? Was it coding or was it communication?
Communication. But it's communication with caveats. I think communication is one of the most critical skills that anyone can develop, period. That said, if for me, especially this time of like the era that we're in, where I view AI as a revolution of technology, and I think it will change everything. I think that without a technical skill set right now, I would not know how to guide the company. Um, I
Mm,
think that we would be behind. I do think it's just like, in the late 90s, the internet became something that businesses were able to start adopting. And through the late 90s and into the early 2000s, you had a wave of adoption and hype, and a lot of companies crashed. But also during that time, some of the biggest, most iconic companies in the world today came from that time. Amazon, Google,
yeah, Microsoft.
Meta, Microsoft was around a little bit earlier, but that's Microsoft, kind of in its current form. So
Mm,
the I would say, we are in a similar era where there is a lot of hype around AI today, and there will be a lot of bad products that are built, a lot of bad AI products that are built. But I also believe that there are, a decade from now, the most iconic companies of the future are being built right now, and
Yeah, I do agree.
they are ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean that could be an episode on itself, Ryan. To be
Yeah,
honest, I don't want
yeah.
to go to that rabbit hole. It's but such a great opinions you're sharing, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, full resonation with that. Um, so I want to ask this: so when it comes to go-to-market leaders, do you think they have a misunderstanding about engineers, which potentially, that leads to not good decisions being made?
Um, I, I I don't know if I don't know that I would say a misunderstanding. I would say a lack of understanding.
Okay.
Um, I think that honestly, I think that every department outside of engineering lacks understanding. I think engineering is often a black box. Um, and I think that's really unfortunate. And I think that's on the engineering departments to change because, you know, companies that are building software as their product, when the engineering team acts like a black box, it's very hard for that company to truly like be successful. It's like, well, we throw it over the fence to engineering and we may or may not ever get it back, right?
Mhm.
Um, it may or may not ever get prioritized. It may or may not ever get fixed. The feature may or may not work. It's like, God, that's frustrating if you have no sense of control of what goes on there. And so I think there is a lack of understanding. And I think that can be greatly improved by immersing engineering more into the culture of the company. Invite engineers to do, we do, um, in fact, we did this at Qualtrics too, but we do weekly company wide all hands. And I love having engineers do demos, and some engineers love it. Some engineers are kind of nervous about it because you may be talking in front of hundreds of people, but let the engineer do the demo, not the product manager. Stop insulating engineers from the company. Let the engineer get up and show what they're proud of. Even if it's like hey, I changed this algorithm and we made, you know, this particular part of our process much more efficient. And why does that matter? It matters because it's going to drive our costs of AWS down by 10% or
Mhm.
whatever, right? I think you can coach an engineer on how to make it resonate, any topic resonate with the broader company, and you should let them get out and immerse themselves.
I fully agree. We do demos with engineers as well. You build it, you present it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very great practice. What's one question you now ask before you build anything new?
Um, why? um,
Oh, that's a good question. I'm even
wh-
while I'm thinking about it. Okay.
why are we building it? Um, and you have to, as I like, just like you said, with AI becoming such a effective tool to help people write software,
Mhm.
I've gotten back into writing a lot of software, which is it's like the best of all worlds. Yeah, I describe myself as an engineer first, then a CEO, and the fact that I can do both, which I feel like I can do now, is just I love. Um, but as an engineer, it is hard to like separate the personal excitement of something you're building from the why are we building it part. Like there's just this natural
Mhm.
tendency to like want to like build it in this certain way or see. Even recently, it's like I built this feature for a new product that we're building, and the first feedback I got on it from the marketing team was like, it's kind of ugly. And
Well,
like,
thanks, guys.
as an engineer, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, look how like it's so elegant, it's so consistent, and it's just why are we building this? We're
Mm-hmm.
building this for this particular purpose. Okay. Did we build it optimally for that purpose? No, we did not. And so I ended up rebuilding it. So it's just hard. It's hard as an engineer because you get really excited about what you're building,
Okay.
personally excited. But you've always like, why are you building it? You're not building it for your own personal benefit. You are
Mm-hmm.
building it for your customer's benefit. And if you're not, then you're in conflict with your company's goals.
Yep.
Um, if you're
Okay.
starting with building it for your customer, then you're aligned with with your company's goals, and you might build something different.
So basically, we're saying a simple question, why, or there's a 5 whys technique, right? Where you just
Yeah.
go like, why? That's
Yep. Five whys is great. Five whys is
yeah.
a great technique.
Ask that before you write any code. Okay, that's a great question. What's harder, unlearning old habits as an engineer, or picking up new skills as a CEO, or or a business operator?
Um, I think it's harder to I think it's harder to break old habits than to develop new skills. Um, I think
Okay.
developing new skills comes with a lot of trial and error, which can be frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But I think breaking habits requires uh, a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment, um, a lot of personal investment, and it's painful. It's like kind of goes back to that quote I said, which is change is painful,
Yeah,
and people resist change unless the pain of not changing is greater.
yeah.
And so, anyways, yeah, that I would say it's hard to break old habits.
I would agree. I have some terrible old habits. They don't leave me. The older I get, the more pronounced they get.
Yeah.
If you could give your younger self a one tip about career growth, what that would be?
I got that one tip, and it changed my career.
Mm,
So it is it is prioritize um, prioritize your own like professional growth based on opportunities that will challenge you over opportunities that may satisfy like or it, over opportunities that lead to like a higher title or a higher pay. And that doesn't say that you shouldn't care about your title and your pay.
mm,
I, I've seen people comment, it's like executives love to say that because you want to hire people cheap and and not give them big, it's that's not the point. The
mhm,
point is prioritize your learning as your primary driver, and then title and pay just need to be, you know, at market fair with what you're doing. And that will put you on the best trajectory for long-term growth.
yeah.
And I got this feedback early in my career. I was managing a team of maybe 15 software engineers at this company, backcountry.com. And I got provided the opportunity to go to Qualtrics, which was a startup,
Mhm,
and they had no managers. And at the time, I felt like the myth in my head was the progression is engineer, team lead, manager, director, VP, all the way up.
mhm,
And
yep.
that's how you do it. And I had been an engineer, I had been a team lead, and I was then a manager. So the thought of going to a startup as a software engineer again felt like a career step back for me. And so that was like a title and responsibility thing kind of attached to my ego that was
Mhm,
hard. But somebody that I trusted said, "Hey, if you think that you will learn more at this company than you will where you are, you should do it, regardless." And I took the leap, and it was the best thing I could have possibly done. And so I teach that often. I tell people, just make sure that you are properly challenged, and ask your manager if you're not properly challenged in your current job. Ask your manager for opportunities and see if there's ways to adapt your role, or find ways to stretch yourself, or other within your current organization. And
mhm,
ultimately, if you can't find you know if you can't find that opportunity where you are, then maybe you should go look for somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that'll put you on a good trajectory, and ultimately in your career, you'll see the high point, the pinnacle.
I fully agree. In general, working towards challenging situations is just how you grow. I think it was Mel Robbins' podcast where they talked about exactly that. Is that if you think about a situation and you finding yourself, quite fearful of the situation, and you're finding excuses of why you should not do that, that usually is a sign that you should go ahead and do
You
that,
should do
because
it.
that's what the growth will be, because it's just going to push you outside of that comfort
Yeah.
zone, and that's why you're thinking like that. So I apply that very often. I'm like, if I start thinking like that, I'm like, okay, well, let's go.
This might be it. Yeah. I tell people too, as I go back in my career looking for examples that I can teach to people, it might be every example that I can draw from was a painful example. Like,
Hmm.
that was an uncomfortable time in my career. And that is why I learned so much from that. And that is why I am now able to teach that. And so in the moment, those things kind of suck. It's like, I am very uncomfortable right now. And in the moment, it's hard to always see the big picture. But the truth is, those will be the moments in your life that you look back to and you say, I had a ton of growth
Yeah,
there.
gives you a great
So
story as well. Yeah, like if anyone's into like public speaking or storytelling, having a great stories to tell is just it's just good, right? And
yeah,
then everything, a great story is always has that climbing the Everest type of challenge, and you
yep,
overcoming that and coming on other side with real lessons to share, right? So
yeah.
I mean, you share just powerful things here, Ryan, today. As if people listening want to learn more from you, what is the best way to connect?
Uh, I I do a pretty good job of kind of sharing my story on LinkedIn. And so that's a great place to follow me. I've started to post a little bit on X as well, but mostly on LinkedIn. I now I would say if you look, back 3 or 4 weeks, I was posting almost every day. Today, it's like you're lucky if you get a post of me in a week, and that's just, the reality is right now I am like immersed in. We are building this new AI product at GRIN, and it is the most
Mm.
fascinating thing that I've ever personally been able to work on. And so, it would just heads down. I'm very heads down building right now, um, but I will be sharing a lot of that story on LinkedIn, so it's a great place to follow me.
Excellent. So, and for everyone tuning in, guys, I appreciate your time. Drop your questions in the comments and go to Mastering Tech Growth to check our community out. And as always, guys, until the next time, stay safe and see you online.